This podcast is part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, a program designed to help all podcasts reach their full potential. For information about joining the Robots Radio Rocket Club, check out robotsradio.net.
Hey all you heroes and champions, crows, pirates, and inquisitors. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast. I'm Shelby.
And I'm Austin.
And we are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe. From the Maker to Lyrium to Aravels, we will cover it all. There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad. Hi, Austin.
Hey, Shelby.
We are so excited to be back tonight for a special episode of the Dragon Age Lorecast. And you might be wondering, if you're a regular listener, what is going on? Because I, Shelby, am starting this episode. And that's because Austin and I are switching roles for this episode. We thought this would be fun. We thought this would be a great change. He did the research, so he's going to present it. So with that, Austin, are you excited for tonight's episode?
I am excited for tonight's episode because tonight, we have a guest.
We do have a guest, and our guest tonight is Safi from the Lore Together podcast.
Hi!
Welcome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here and just geek out and with the love of Dragon Age that my husband tolerates from time to time for an episode or two here at Lore Together. So thank you so much for inviting me. I love it.
Of course. All right, Austin, are you ready to tell them what our topic is today?
I am, except one more thing, Sappy. If you wouldn't mind, we ask all our guests this. Just how did you get into Dragon Age? Which game did you start with? And what hooked you from to this series?
I'll try to keep this brief because it's kind of actually a saga. It's a funny story. So soon after Mystic and I started dating, I a year into dating, because we were long distance because it was my last year of college. I came back to Chicago area, and he mentioned this game he really liked playing, which was Dragon Age Origins, and his laptop could run it at the time. And we were I was I want to play it, but I don't have a computer right now that can play it. So because we were both paranoid people who are I love this person, but also this is a laptop and I watch People's Court, signed a contract to borrow his laptop because we're just dorks like that. And I played the original Dragon Age Origins, and I actually, started a playthrough. I think it was a dwarf noblewoman. And I never finished that playthrough just because I messed up some choices and Alistair hated me and I couldn't live with myself.
Yeah.
So... and then from there on out, that is my fantasy setting. I'm usually a hard sci-fi person. I'm a third generation Trekkie. That's my jam. But if something about Dragon Age just satisfies what I want in a story when it comes to a fantasy setting. I love it. And I keep going back to it. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
It's such a good setting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely, I like that it takes the things and then kind of twists them just enough to make it really interesting and exciting. So you're not just yeah, there's some Tolkien tropes, but then they're yeah, but what if we did it like this so that the elves aren't always having the upper hand and everything like that, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Shelby and I actually lived in Chicago for 3 years up on the
We did.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
on the north side. So a little connection there.
Cool. We are currently on the north side near the Brown Line
Okay.
area. So
Yeah.
Cool. We lived off the Purple Line.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. We
All right. Well, thank you for sharing. We always love to hear how people get into Dragon Age and all of that. And so our topic today is once a month, which we're a little behind because I know it's February. But for January, we're going to do a character deep dive, and that character is the one and only Sir Cullen Rutherford. And so, as Shelby normally does, I've got some fun facts. So, my first fun fact is probably my favorite. And that is that Cullen is one of the few characters in the Dragon Age series that no matter what choice you make, will make an appearance in every Dragon Age game.
They're like only on one hand that many characters you can really say that about, I think. You know, a couple which come to mind, but I'm afraid to say them because I feel it might be spoilery. I don't know how spoilery.
Oh,
we have a
do
spoiler
spoilers
warning, so
in our intro.
the games
okay.
are. I mean, Inquisition's almost 10 years old, so.
Oh yeah, I forget. It's like, oh yeah, my hair's gray, and one of my favorite games is over 10 years old. Okay, so, but yeah, other than like Cullen, I think like obviously Witch of the Wild / now we know Mythal is like one of them, and I think Liliana, and then like I think that's it. Am I
Alistair
forgetting
comes
one?
close. There is one instance where you could make a choice where he does not appear in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Right.
And then...
And did you say Tegan?
Oh yeah,
Tegan.
if you count DLCs,
No.
Tegan makes an appearance in every game because he's at the Chateau in Dragon Age 2, where you do the Heart of the Many quest, and then he is in the Trespasser. And I kind of count Trespasser as the main game because there's no reason it shouldn't have been the end of Dragon Age Inquisition.
Well, except for the fact that BioWare is owned by EA.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I love our EA overlords. They make great games.
AKA, you don't want to get a cease and desist letter.
Gotta cover yourself there. I know that feeling. Believe me. Oh, I did an episodes on lore about The Sims, and I kind of had the same feelings where it's like, look, I'm gonna talk some trash about it, but please don't sue me.
Yep. At least we're not talking about Disney games. I think we're okay then.
Oh,
they are
one of the many
table
reasons
flip.
I will never do a Star Wars lorecast or a podcast.
Let it be somebody else's mess for sure.
Yeah, that's not our jam.
My second and my only other one fun fact is, and I did a lot of research on this, so if I'm wrong, someone's a lot better at this than I am. But Cullen is one of only 3 former Templars we meet in game. Other than, I mean, if you count Inquisition, they're all technically former Templars. But he left the order before what's called the Navaran Accords were abolished. And those former Templars are Cullen, Samson, and Alistair.
Yep.
And Alistair is kind of also barely counting because he didn't even do his vigil or take his vows or anything like that. Both Cullen and Samson do show signs of lyrium withdrawals, and I think it's nice that they both handle it very differently. Kind of just a real representation of like addiction in the real life, that 2 people can face the same issue but react entirely differently.
Yeah. Another reason why I like the Dragon Age fantasy setting, a lot of fantasy settings are all about overarching like ideas of destiny and family lineage and stuff, and Dragon Age is brave enough to be like, let's talk about things that are very much more personal, one-on-one, individual, nuancy things in our fantasy setting, and let's just be bold about it. Let's just be like, okay, it's magical, but it's still drug withdrawal. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Although now I want to do a Dragon Age version of Train Spotting because I'm a horrible person. So,
All right. So we'll do a little bit of background on Cullen. Cullen was born in 911 Dragon, which is around so that would put him around early 20-ishes at the start of Dragon Age Origins.
And like 30s in his Inquisition.
Yeah.
And
pretty.
Yeah, and he is one of 4 children. And this is my favorite story from his childhood. At age 8, Cullen bravely announces to his siblings that he is going to be a Templar. And his sister Mia laughs at him and says, "And I will be a princess." And then his other brother, who is not named, decides to tackle the quote unquote Sir Cullen into the lake at Honleith.
That's
So-
hilarious.
Yeah.
Typical sibling behavior.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
perfect.
Despite the teasing, Cullen does indeed persistently bother the Templars of Honleith, which were not many, and they cave and teach him to fight with the sword and other skills that he could use. To one day, when he was 13, the local knight commander comes to Honleith, and impressed with Cullen's determination and skill, he recruits him into the order. Cullen then quickly became the top recruit in his class and is eventually stationed at the Circle in Fereldan, where he remains until the beginning of the Fifth Blight. So yeah, kind of that farm boy to noble knight story here for Cullen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Rags to riches practically.
Yeah. And I think that totally, like, his upbringing totally makes sense when you think about how uncomfortable he is at the Winter Palace in Orlais. Like, he hates it. He's so
yeah.
uncomfortable the whole time. So when you think about how he grew up, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, he didn't grow up with wealth and privilege like most noble people in Orlais do.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it also kind of like, well, on top of the rest of the story we'll probably get to of his background, it kind of also gives like a good foundation to his intensity of the importance of his task, like, because he had to search it out, whereas a bunch of other Templars were like, well, you're like the fifth noble child, we can't really do much with you. You want to join the Chantry or the Templars? Which one do you want?
Right.
So
Right.
And so obviously the events of Dragon Age Origin happen. The Circle is besieged by abominations and demons, by Uldridge. Is that his name?
Uldred, I think.
Uldred. He comes
Yeah.
back from Ostagar and basically decides, screw the Circle, forget this, and he summons a sloth demon, which then summons other demons. And during that time, Cullen is imprisoned he is imprisoned in this magical cage and is tormented by demons, and it's really traumatic for him. And he unfortunately does not handle that well, and he proposes to, if you haven't played it, he proposes to the hero of Fereldan at the time to kill all the mages up there. And you can agree or not agree, but if you save the mages, Cullen is demanding that they be executed, because you never know what could happen with the abominations, and you can either refuse or deny that. If all the mages survive and Gregor is still in charge of the Circle, Cullen is then sent to Greenleaf by Gregor, which is another small town in Fereldan, to the Chantry to quote Gregor, level himself out. So he spends a couple years there, and then by, the first year of Dragon Age 2, we find Cullen and we meet him in Kirkwall, where he has been promoted to Knight Captain, which is like a step below, if you remember from our Templar episode, a step below the Knight Commander. So he's kind of second in command to Meredith, where he plays an active role in the champion's role in the Circle, and eventually, if you side with the Templars a little too late, opposes Meredith in the act of annulment.
yeah, I really liked that you guys brought up in the Templar episode. It's like, why did he really should have stepped in earlier? Like, if he knew his position, that was there was like Act 2-ish of Dragon Age been like, hey, Meredith, chill it out.
Mhm.
Can you sit in the corner here? Maybe take a bubble bath, have a spa day. Take a tip from Vivian, take care of
Yeah.
yourself, and then we'll figure out what's going on.
Yeah, totally. And I guess I'm kind of confused on the timeline, Austin. Maybe you can give us some more info. Like, so does he appear, I guess, Act 1 of DA2, you do get into the city, and it ends with going into the deep roads, right?
Correct.
So
you meet Cullen.
What's that time span there, I guess, is my real question.
So the time from you, I don't know the time frame of Act 1 per se, because I don't know like how long it takes to get from you leaving either the smugglers or the mercenaries to you going to the deep roads. I don't know the time there, but the time from the Hawks landing in Kirkwall to the start of Act 1 is 1 year.
So the Hawks leaving Fereldan and traveling, like that is all 1 year.
No, them landing in Kirkwall to the start of Act 1.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. Right, because they've been working with whichever
faction you choose.
Yes.
Yeah. They've been working with them for a while, and then that's part of the reason why they have enough of a reputation to Varric to give him a second chance, if I remember correctly. So.
And it's 3 years between Act 1 and 2.
Okay.
I think Dragon Age 2 as a total game is probably about 5 or 6 years long.
No, I think it's longer than that because isn't the distance between Acts 2 and 3 5 years?
I can't remember, but it's somewhere between that 6 to 8 range.
So so here's my comment. So if we're measuring by when the hero of Fereldan in Origins leaves the Fereldan Circle to when we meet Cullen in Act 2.
We meet him in Act 1. We meet him in Act 1.
Okay. And he's already a Templar there.
Yes. So we meet him in Act 1.
But he's not Knight Captain in Act 1.
No, he's not quite Knight Captain yet. He's in the quest called Enemies Among Us, which is the quest with the Templar who you have to go to the Blooming Rose, and there's that demon who is posing as a sex worker. And
oh, wow.
Wilmid is his name, right?
Yes, Wilmid, yes. And so you basically find him like Wilmid is about to turn into an abomination as Cullen is like trying to stand him down.
Right.
That's where the hero or the champion of Kirkwall, where Hawk meets Cullen.
Okay, so it's like 2 years, I guess, ish.
Yeah, I mean he's there. The thing about the timeline gets tricky because I think that in a lot of ways, the way Dragon Age Origins ends is that BioWare didn't know if they would make another game in this series.
Right.
So it kind of ends up. So there's things that happen in the epilogue of Dragon Age Origins that don't make sense with the other games.
Well, I've always heard that, I don't know if this is actually canon or not, but I've always heard and read that the epilogue is kind of like rumors from the people of Thedas about what those people did.
Yes, that is true. There is a note in the Dragon Age wiki about what happens to Cullen. It's saying that these rumors are, because there are rumors that he's executed too, which we know to be false.
Unless he's a lyrium ghost.
Yes. Don't get me started on lyrium ghosts.
Okay, I won't.
Anyway,
I want that to be my answer to everything now. Lyrium ghost.
I think this is an important moment of Cullen's like progression of where he goes, because when we meet him in Dragon Age 2 with Hawk, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who played Dragon Age 2 who didn't even really remember Cullen.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he's such a quick character, and you remember Irving and Gregor a little more because they're the ones you deal with.
Right. And he also looks very different from game to game.
Yes.
Yes.
Reaching the peak of his attractiveness in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
100%.
Yes. Had to acknowledge that at least once in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
But just that kind of, he starts in, when we meet him, you can still see the trauma of what happened to him in the Fereldan Circle. He is terrified of mages. And whether that justifies his actions, I can't say because I haven't experienced something like Cullen has.
Right.
But then you progress, and I think it's by knowing the champion of Kirkwall, especially if Hawk is a mage, that he comes to realize that mages can be good people. And there's a really good quote that he says If You Side with the Templars, which I've only done like once or twice. He said, you capture mages after you're doing that, and Meredith's like executing them or whatever, and Cullen basically says the rite of the annulment made sense in Fereldan, and even then we left mages alive.
Right.
And he says this doesn't make sense, and it's kind of the start. There are starts in Act 3 of Cullen like saying like, okay, this is a little crazy, and like you can bring his you can bring kind of the whole tranquil solution and all these quests to Cullen, and he starts to kind of like say like, oh, okay. But there definitely is that moment where he doesn't act fast enough, and I really think he does end up regretting a lot of that, and that is one of the reasons that he does end up leaving the Templar Order. But the real final thing that leaves the Templar Order is, I love this story. So from the World of Thedas, this is what it says. It says, Seeker Cassandra Pentagast walks into Cullen's office, sits down, and lays out everything to him, saying that they need him to come and command the forces, and this is a chance to do right, and all of that. And she leaves with the last word of like, the choice is yours. And she leaves his office, and then Cullen gets up and leaves and goes with the Inquisition.
Yeah.
And then we're at the events of Inquisition.
Woo! Where Cullen actually starts to kind of matter
Yes.
at this point. You know, he's no longer set dressing or like playing on the themes. He's an actual fully realized character. I feel like that's when we start to really know him.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like he doesn't really become like, it sounds bad, but I feel like he doesn't really become a person until Inquisition. And like what I mean by that is that he doesn't actually have motivations or desires or, you know, I mean, he has flaws, but he doesn't really have a personality until Inquisition.
That's a really good point, Shelby, because it's kind of like in Origins and Dragon Age 2, he's kind of there to show kind of like the moral choices that you as a player are playing with. He's kind of there to be like, here's the theme, and like hit, like almost Brechtian, like hit you over the head with a hammer of what the theme is. And then by Inquisition, it's like, here is a person who happens to exist in this world where all this stuff happens to be true, and they are, you know, and then you're experiencing like him recovering as a victim of trauma, recovering as an addict delirium, you know, leading everything, even in the middle of the game, acknowledging like some of his flaws with like how he relates to his family.
And so, speaking of Inquisition, that is where Cullen makes some of his most meaningful impacts. If you side with the mages, it is Cullen who leads the hunt for Samson. It is him who organizes that. If you enact judgment, sit in judgment on any Templar character, it is Cullen, not Josephine, who oversees that judgment. And these are just funny quotes that happen at the war table. If you are a woman mage, warden, and you romanced Liliana, this conversation happens because Cullen would have known you. So Cullen says, so you and Liliana, yes. Cullen, did she ever? Liliana, are you asking for details? Cullen, no, that would be inappropriate.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I have to now play that through at some point. That's hilarious.
And then this one happens if you are in a romance with Cullen. Cullen says, Inquisitor, we were, Liliana, eagerly awaiting your presence. Some of us more than others. Cullen, I was, we have work to do. Liliana, of course.
It's always Liliana.
It's by that point in Inquisition, she just cuts through everything.
Yeah.
She's seen so much that she's kind of like, yeah, let's not pussyfoot around this. This is what's going on, which I love.
And like, there's a great, if you take Liliana to Broken Circle in Dragon Age Origins, she is the one party member that has compassion on Cullen and what's happening to him. She's the one party member who says, look at him, it's poor thing. He must have been tortured.
And that makes a lot of sense, just knowing her character and like what she went through, and her still, because I mean, by the time she's at Inquisition, she could be a lot more cutthroat. But when you first meet her, it's like, yeah, I was a spy and a bard, and like I was playing for that, but also I had a heart and I fell in love and I made mistakes and I'm still trying to figure that out. And she does a lot of growing by the time you see her in Inquisition from there to then.
Yeah, she's lost like every ounce of naivete that she had.
Right. And now she's just coy about it. Like she knows what's going on and she'll reference it. She's just a little Orlesian about it, that's all.
Yeah.
All right. So now let's learn about where Cullen is now, which is dependent on the choices you make in Inquisition. And get ready, it gets a little sad. So this is the situation if Cullen is not taking lyrium and is a romance with the new Inquisitor. Cullen and the Inquisitor retire to a private life together with their new dog friend. In Fereldan, they continue doing good works on their own terms and visit with Cullen's family. That's cute. Yeah. This is if Cullen is not taking lyrium and is not in a romance with the Inquisitor. Cullen retires from active service. Divine Victoria grants him land, and he establishes a sanctuary/rehab for former Templars. He promises to pick up the sword if his friends ever need him. And here comes sad. This is if Cullen is still taking lyrium and is not in a romance with the Inquisitor. Later on, Scout Harding finds him living as a beggar on the streets of Valshevin. He is the last stages of lyrium madness. He suggested that she ended his suffering either by giving him coin to get more lyrium or providing him a quick death. And that is all if the Inquisition is disbanded. If the Inquisition continues on with under Divine Victoria, if Cullen is not taking lyrium and in a romance, Cullen and the Inquisitor continue to guide the Inquisition. They continue to do good works on their own term and also visit Cullen's family with their happy dog. Cullen is not taking lyrium or was promised to find a solution later and is not in a romance with the Inquisitor. Cullen continued to serve as commander. He also established means for taking care of Templars who want to quit lyrium or have lost their minds. And then if Cullen is still taking lyrium, Cullen abruptly retires from the Inquisition and disappears. Cullen loses his mind to lyrium and becomes a beggar on the streets. He's found by Scout Harding and is either given coin or a quick death. Yeah.
There's a sad one again.
So they're pretty similar no matter what happened. Like if the Inquisition is disbanded or continues, they're fairly similar no matter like each of those two things. It just depends on like your actions in the game, it seems like to me.
And this is another just really cute moment. Right. If you romance Cullen as an elf, in the wedding scene, they do recite vows in Elvish.
Oh, yes. That's adorable.
So yeah, that's Cullen in more of a nutshell. This not a side, not like a secondary character, a really important character, especially for Inquisition. Mm-hmm. I think that what attracts me to Cullen so much as a character is, I'm a sucker for a good redemption arc. Sad boy redemption arc.
Yes.
Yeah, you are. And I will say, like, for me, Cullen is my Inquisitor's canon romance. And it's real. If you know me well, like in real life, that's surprising. Like, I don't usually go for the white boy of the month. Like, that's not my jam. So when I first started playing Inquisition, years or 2 years ago, however long it was, I was surprised that like that's the character, that's the romance that I was more attracted to in the beginning. But now looking back, it kind of does make sense because his story is like a redemption arc. It is this kind of like introspective looking at yourself and like trying to fix yourself. It's almost like you're getting therapy. I don't know if that exists in the Dragon Age universe, but like he's trying to better himself. So I do really appreciate that about Cullen.
Yeah. So I think he's like, whenever I play, depending on, the character, he is one of the romances I'm more likely to play. And my original canon playthrough, because I'm a sucker for punishment, is that I romance Solus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, speaking on like the game being more than 10 years old, I think part of it was that I was really at the time into those stories of, the stereotypical, like, the man you have to save,
Mhm.
and wasn't feeling the Blackwall setup for that one. That was just not for me. But Solus seemed like that guy, and now that we see one, we know where that's going, and two, the connotation of like what makes Solus the wrong choice is now very like, oh, you just want to kill almost everybody and have your own ideal perfect world. Sounds genocidal. Not that now I can't really get down with that. So, like, playing again, I actually, when I did a playthrough once, I did a hoity-toity. I don't know if we can curse in this podcast, so
Yeah, you
I will.
did.
Okay, so what? My next playthrough, I did one called the bitch Quisitor, where she was like a snooty noble, like
Best
army
friends
free
with
marches
Vivian.
lady. Yeah, absolutely best friends with Vivian, all about Harold of Andraste, very much like just unaware of like how she just didn't care about anything else. And she romanced Cullen, and I think that was my favorite part of that playthrough, because it's you're then with a guy who's like, I'm doing the work. I appreciate your help, but I know it's that I have to do the work on myself. And as I've gotten older and more mature, not that wasn't mature 10 years ago, but I think, I mean, like, my preference, my taste in what romances I would do in a video game have changed. So he's now, I think, one more of the ones, like, if I was going to just do a regular playthrough just for funsies, like, I would more likely choose Cullen over most of the other options there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the, like, maybe not replayability, but one reason for me, at least, that I am drawn back to Cullen's romance is that you get a wedding in Trespasser,
Yes.
and that's so cute. And I
It's
think
adorable.
Sarah's romance is the only other one that gets a wedding. Which,
yeah,
that sucks.
I think it's Cullen, and then the only other one is Sarah.
Yeah.
If you romance her. So everybody else, there's just some reason why you can't do it one way or another. I mean,
Yeah.
like, if you're really dumb, like my first playthrough, there is just no way you're ever getting back with.
Yeah. Or, some of you get dumped because your romance becomes divine.
She doesn't dump
It's
you.
so heartbreaking.
That's a tough
No,
one.
you can say that you're basically, the epilogue
Yeah, she
basically
does.
says you're like, you have hidden romance.
Okay. But you don't get to get married. You don't get to have kids. You don't get to, like, live together. You don't get any of that.
That's kind of like the Harden Alistair choice in Origins, where he's king and he marries Honora, but because you've hardened him, he's like, but I mean, do you want to be my booty call? I get to have a booty call as king, right? Like, that's it. Not necessarily as, like, I don't know, depressing as that, but still, it's not the same. I mean, and it's not like the other romances aren't any good. Like, I'm currently going through a Canary Mage one where I'm going to romance Iron Bull, partly because also when I was a teenager, I had the biggest crush on Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
This is the closest I'm ever going to get. So here we are.
Because Mass Effect won't let you romance James Vega.
No,
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, there's like a one night stand that can happen in. Basically, if you haven't romanced anyone in Mass Effect 3 by the time you do the Citadel party, you can have an affair with James. But it's
like that.
super sketchy.
Like that.
Yeah.
It's super sketchy.
I think it's funny because, like, Mystic and I were talking about it, how I think actually we were guests on the Boss Rush podcast, and we talked about how some of the lines are kind of flirty when Jennifer McHale says them. And I think there was an idea about a romance before, but I think some of the other writers probably came in and be like, yeah, so Shepard's more of a mentor, and that's kind of sketch. Can we not do that? And so the tone of how McHale says some of the lines still feels kind of flirty. but it doesn't really materialize anything unless. And then who's playing all 3 games and not finding somebody they want to romance before they get a chance to be with Vega? Like
Right,
how?
right.
How?
Yes.
Thane romancers.
Mancers. Oh, that's
Thane.
sad. That's sad. I can't. We got to move on. This is not the Mass Effect Lorecast. Okay. I'm gonna cry.
We'll do a special episode another time, I'm sure.
Yes.
And then that's the one Mystic will be like, okay, I have to be in on that one.
So, yeah. What were we talking about?
What we like, what we love about.
Iron Bull.
Yeah.
Iron Bull.
Cullen.
That's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Can you romance Iron Bull if you sacrifice the Chargers?
Yes.
I think it just messes up.
That is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I think
it is.
it messes up the Trespasser ending, I think, is what happens though, because he still ends up leaving. So it's
Yeah. It's
so
sad. So Bull dumps you. Cassandra, if she becomes divine, dumps you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Bull only dumps you if you sacrifice the charges. You don't sacrifice the charges.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Which
Blackwall.
What is Blackwall?
Good old Blackwall, pro. It depends on what you decide to do in his reveal.
Yeah. See, there's too many variables on some of them.
Yeah.
Solus leaves you.
Always. Forever alone.
God, can you imagine? I know this is a tangent, but like, imagine being a Solus Mancer. And I haven't finished my Solus romance playthrough, so I haven't gotten to this point yet. But like, I can't imagine how heartbreaking it would be when you finally defeat Corypheus and you're like, yes, oh my God, this is amazing. We've finally done it. And then he just leaves you. Like, that's so sad.
Oh, it's worse than that. I don't know how much I would spoil it for you, Shelby, but it's worse than that.
I'm sad.
He breaks up before you get to Corypheus.
Oh, that's horrible.
It's so hard. The first time I played it, because I didn't have any spoilers, I spoiled the game for myself, being like, what did I do wrong? How did I lose Solus? I have to fix this. And then I found out and then I spoiled, why he has to end up breaking up with you anyway. And then Trespasser came out and I was like, I will get him. Oh, no.
You will not.
No.
Oh man.
So my canon Soul of Ellen Hell playthrough is my character desperately, for all the wrong reasons, being like, I will save and redeem him. Like, it's tragic little elf mage girl.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Sarah and Josephine end up happy.
And Cullen.
That's true.
And Cullen.
Yeah.
So Cullen, you get the happy. You get a wedding and a
dog. And a dog.
Yeah. You're the only one that gets the dog. So Cullenmancers are definitely superior for sure.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I think that I was surprised when I started Inquisition and they had Cullen as a player in there. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I was like, are they just going to give him a bigger role each game?
Right.
Turns out he is the maker in Dragon Age 4. No big deal.
Yes.
Oh, so many fan theories.
Oh my God.
So is there anything? Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I really did appreciate that how much they were willing to evolve, because it actually makes sense with everything he's gone through. As you said, the redemption arc, and it didn't feel like too much of a stretch to me. I don't know how other players feel about it, but when you talk to Cullen and you realize his background and you see why he was good for the Inquisition, it's like, oh, this is actually pretty logical in a storytelling front. And it's really nice that we were able to do it with a character that, if you're paying attention, you've seen through all of the games.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And for me, I do think that his redemption arc is more powerful if you do romance him, just because I think he shares a little bit more of that with you if you're in a relationship with him, especially some of his thoughts about if you are a mage romancing him, coming to terms with that and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's a little bit more powerful that way. But I will say, I've seen a lot of people on Reddit and Twitter who feel like his redemption arc is undeserved, because so much of it happens off screen with him and Cassandra
Right.
in Kirkwall, she convincing him to come to the Inquisition, and then the rest of it is kind of like internal work that he has to do. And I don't necessarily agree with that take. I understand it, and I definitely like have empathy for that view. But for me, I think so much of redemption is internal, and it's really hard to separate that from any external work you might do, because then if your redemption arc is totally external, then it seems like it's all for show to me.
Right. Yeah.
I actually watched a video on while doing research on redemption arcs, because one of them was comparing Zuko and Avatar to Kylo Ren, and why they have similar themes, but one feels, in the video person's opinions, one feels that the other has more weight and plausibility than the other. And he basically laid out that redemption arcs need two things. They need a relatable reason for why someone does bad things. So like with Zuko, it's his desire to earn honor with his family, return to his father, go back to his home. Like there are relatable things, like a troubled parent, and like Zuko's a teenager. Like these are all things that relate to that. And like Cullen has that too. He's tortured by demons, and like you might not have an agree with him, but you can't say that like his fear and anxiety and all this thing about mages is unfounded.
Yeah.
And the other thing they need is the character needs a change of worldview.
Right.
Something dramatic needs to happen that changes their worldview. So like with Zuko, it's the fact that he realizes that his father is a piece of shit and he doesn't need him. And with Cullen, it's the whole thing in Kirkwall and him turning against Meredith. And there's this moment of him, his worldview changing and him acting because of it. And so that's why I would say his redemption does work, because it contains these elements.
One of the things I think that's also really interesting is about how much of that is actually kind of tied to his faith, because like when you first see him in Origins in Trapped, he is praying to Andraste the Maker, being like, save me from this, which is also really creepy if you play a female mage and suddenly it's like, oh, I know you brought her here to tempt me, and it's like, what? You think you think you think about me? Weird. But and it's interesting that even though his worldview changes, his faith remains the same. Like he still is very much an Andrastian Fereldan. Like when, especially considering he's one of the first people to start singing When the Dawn Will Come, you know, and just like you do see him praying regularly, and just in just the way that he is still rooted in that faith. But it's interesting that he decides that like the mage thing might be a little bit too much. Like it's the faith and the creed is kind of there, but the dogma part of it, the practice of it, is what he's actually critical of. It's kind of like, you know, a Catholic who's pro-choice. It's like, yeah, the church might say this, but I have kind of come to terms with the fact that, you know, my faith has led me to believe that this is the better way to go about it. You know, it conflicts, but at the same time, you can see that that's kind of the piece that he's made with it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are extremists in every religion, right? And I think it's really interesting to look at Cullen in that lens, because you can argue, and I think this is probably a pretty fair argument, that he might be an extremist, at least in Origins and Dragon Age 2, but then throughout 2 and by the time of Inquisition, he moves away from being a religious extremist and more into just, you know, a person of faith who is not necessarily that extreme in their views. Because, you know, you're right, he does pray often. You find him, there's that cutscene, I think it's close to the end of the game, where he's like praying in the chapel thing. And I think if you establish the prayer garden instead of the herb garden, where Morrigan is, you can find him out there like occasionally, just randomly, sometimes praying and stuff too.
Oh wow.
And I think that in this like Cullen might be commander of the armed forces, But like technically, as Seeker, Cassandra outranks Cullen.
Right, that's
Right.
true too.
Like by very,
Right.
very high leagues. And I think that I like to think in my head, Ken, that part of Cullen's faith is mentorship. Because Cassandra is very much in a place where her faith is open to like, maybe the Maker doesn't work as the Chantry always tells us to. Maybe things are not as black and white as the Chantry wants us to believe. But Cassandra is also,
Right.
I mean, she becomes divine. And I think that of the three divine possibilities, she's probably the one that believes in Andraste and the Maker the most.
Yeah, I
That's a
agree.
really-
With
I mean,
that.
Liliana obviously has her vision and everything, but
But Liliana really loses her faith in Inquisition. I mean, you
Yeah.
can help her get it back, and there are things she says that are still faithful, but overall, I wouldn't say that she's like devout anymore, at least not in the same way that
Right.
Cassandra is.
Yeah. Even if you do her mission and you like convince her to not be like a hardened, like bloodied
Yeah.
person, I think the thing with Liliana is that her faith was so rooted in the structure of the Chantry is what's going to save people. And whereas Cassandra and Cullen are more like it's the Maker himself and how
Right.
he works through us. Like they're very much devoted of like the spirit of the Maker, the spirit of Andraste working through
right.
people rather than the structure of the Chantry helping the
And so
world.
I like to think that Cassandra kind of takes that mentorship role with Cullen, and that is a moment of like helping him see that just because he throws out Templar, being a Templar doesn't mean he has to throw out his faith. Which for someone with like Cullen, who faith is important, that's probably a big key in his redemption and his own like keeping his sanity.
And for a person who's been at least training with and becoming a Templar for over half of his life by this point. Like,
Right.
that's hard. That is so hard. I don't think there's anything that I've done in my life for half of it that I've walked away from. So I can't imagine how hard that would be.
That's a really good point. Like I'm trying to think of anything that I have similarly. And there are things I walked away from that I invested years in, but I don't think half of my life.
Right,
I
right.
don't I think, like there's the stuff that as you and like of course then you have to think of it like how much of it carries through to an adult because
Mhm.
he started being a Templar very young. He gains a lot of sorry, I've heard monitor. He gains a lot of experience at a very young age. He gains a lot of responsibility at a young age if you think about it. And then by the time like we're meeting him and what he's how old is he then? Like he's born 9/11, 940's Dragon Age Inquisition. So what? He's 29.
Right, 29, right around 30.
I mean, like he's like already at like maturity level of
Mhm.
midlife crisis, and
Mhm.
he's not even almost 30. Like he's
Right.
by the time you end Trespasser, he's 32. Like what?
Right. Right.
It's a lot. It kind of
Yeah.
speaks to how much all the stuff, including the trauma that he went through, kind of changes him and shapes him and kind of forces him to grow up.
Yeah. And like, I wonder, because you're right, that is such a midlife crisis moment for him. And so I wonder, like, what is the lifespan on a Templar? I didn't find any of this info in our Templar research. But I know, like, in Origins, when you go to Denerim, you can't go inside the Chantry. There are the two Templars standing there, and one of them is older, and he's like lyrium addled and has lost his mind.
Right.
But we don't know how old he is, so it makes me wonder if it's similar to Grey Wardens in that they have a really young life expectancy because of the lyrium. And so like, would this be the midlife?
Origins
like,
is
his
not a
midlife?
good judge of age, though, because Wynn's supposed to be like 30.
I know. No, she's supposed to be like 45, and she looks like she's pushing 70.
Right.
And then Cullen is supposed to be freaking 19, and he looks like he's 45.
Well,
It makes
I guess they're
Yes.
going for like you
Yeah.
know fantasy setting life expectancy was smaller, so like
I mean, It was, but
Right,
also
right.
it wasn't.
Who knows?
You know what I mean? I
Who
don't
knows
know.
what really
Right.
things? But
Yeah. You could just blame it on the potato graphics and just call it a day on that
That's
one.
accurate. Yep. I was gonna ask y'all, is there anything we dislike about Cullen?
I don't like when he throws the lyrium jar at me.
That's fair.
Oh yeah, that's totally
fair.
fair.
I was gonna say that I don't like his voice actor.
Oh, well, that's true. I don't think Cullen would like his voice actor.
That's accurate. Well, if we don't have anything else about Cullen, Safi, can you tell us where our listeners can find you guys?
Yeah, so Lore Together should be on all of the ways that you can get your podcast. You can reach out to us on Twitter at Lore Together. We also have our Instagram at Lore Together. If you ever want to email us directly, loretogether@gmail.com. And we also have a Patreon. If you end up liking us enough, we would love your support. Patreon.com/Lore Together. So if you like having like a bi-weekly different dose of some crazy video game storytelling, we would love to have you listen to us and join us on the Boss Rush network Discord, where I finally got Mystic to join, and now we're there nerding it up with all the other fellow gamers, having a good time.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank y'all all for joining us on this week's episode of the Dragon Age Lorecast.
Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. As always, you can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast. If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, email them to us at dalorecast@gmail.com. The Dragon Age Lorecast is a part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club. You can join the Robots Radio Network Discord by clicking the link in our episode description. If you enjoyed our show, we'd love it if you'd subscribe and give us a review. See you next time.
Ever wanted to be a content creator but had no clue where to begin? Come join me as I sit down with content creators that have already faced the challenges you're up against, as they discuss the tips and tricks that help them be successful. Here on The Content Creator's Guide, available wherever podcasts can be found.